The Workplace Wanderer is back after a couple of weeks off, only because of some travel issues and some events we had to go to. But I am always so excited. This is probably one of the highlights of my week. Every week I get to do one of these interviews. The idea of the Workplace Wanderer actually came from my business partner, Amanda Marino, and she talked to me a little bit about the idea of interviewing different professionals in the leadership field, since it's an area that I'm fascinated by. And for me, then I kind of ran with it and really kind of developed this idea of, I want to learn from the experts. I want to learn from people and be a student to people who have been leaders in different areas, arenas, professions, and sort of understand their mindset and how they became the person that they became and what matters to them most in terms of leadership theory and the way that they believe leaders should operate. And for me, I just want to always remain a student, which is probably why I'm on this forever student path of actually going to school. But, this is a topic and a concept that is just so exciting to me, to be able to continue to discuss and have these conversations with professionals. So today I am talking about a great topic that's also very appropriate for right now, and I'll get into why in a little bit. But today's happiness as a leader, and I have a new friend of mine, Ryan Gallik. Is that
Gallik?
Say it right? Gallik. Okay. So like I said, new friend. I don't know how to pronounce the last name yet, but I can certainly say Ryan. So Ryan, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And by the way that you pronounced it is how the entire world pronounces it. So no problems there.
All right, good. I like being in line with the rest of the world. So tell everyone a little bit about yourself, who you are. Give me your elevator pitch on the Ryan Gallik.
Yeah, so I live here in Winter Park, Florida, originally from Ohio. I had an early career as a firefighter paramedic. I was able to serve my community for nearly 20 years before an early retirement due to a hearing deficit. So I knew that my tenure as a firefighter paramedic, would not be as long as, what most people have, 25, 30 years. So while I was in the fire service, I really needed to begin thinking, what would my second career be? And so I quickly started to discover what really is my life purpose, and it's to enhance humanity. That is why I live. It's to enhance humanity. I did that as a first responder, and now as the co-founder of the Mental Hygiene Project, where we help organizations empower minds, accelerate performance, and boost resilience in the workforce. I get to continue to do that more proactively. So I really go in, our company goes in and helps develop high cultures of high performing teams, emotional intelligence, leadership theories and leadership development, and employee well-being. So I'm excited to talk about happiness because there's so many people that are in the pursuit of it, yet they really don't know what it is.
Yeah. And I don't want to skip to the end of this conversation, but I have a feeling that this concept of happiness has a lot to do with what you mentioned is your pursuit in life, which is improving humanity, improving society, and kind of giving to others, that altruistic belief of being of service to others, I imagine really contributes to this idea of you feeling fulfilled and happy.
Yeah, but it didn't start off that way. I started off starting a company, and it's successful and it still exists. I own two companies. One I'm sole proprietor of, and the Mental Hygiene Project. I have a wonderful business partner, Michael Stahl. But before the Mental Hygiene Project, I started a company, and I was always in the pursuit of making great money. I thought that's the way that I'm going to become happy. Once I have six figures, I'll become happy. And so I landed a contract with a very well-known company in the world, and was making, very good money, thousands upon thousands of dollars a month. And in less than a year, my happiness just plummeted, and I had suicidal ideations.
Wow.
So Yeah, so that's what encouraged me to write my book, Silent Mayday, The Clinician's Guide to Working with First Responders. So that's really how the Mental Hygiene Project was born, was through my lived experiences, through my recovery. And you know, I found that post-traumatic growth, but I was in the pursuit of happiness, money, and in fact, I did not find happiness. My happiness baseline spiked once I started making that kind of money.
Yeah.
But even research goes to show after time with circumstances, they tend to be short-lived.
Yeah, it's a very superficial way of trying to achieve happiness, is when we're thinking that this concept of money and property is going to give us this sense of fulfillment, and it doesn't. I saw a study yesterday that I think it was the Harvard Business Review put out an article, and when I actually read it, so the headline was, according to recent study, money does equate to happiness. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Like this is insane. And when you actually read like how most articles kind of twist data, and most studies even twist data to kind of support a certain hypothesis, it was basically stating that money can help you by having a certain financial cushion. It can help you then pursue happiness in other areas. But the way that the headline read was essentially that having the money is going to equate to happiness. And you quickly read, as you're reading through this, realize that the money really has little to do with it, other than taking away a stressor that then allows you to focus on a more altruistic, a more spiritual journey that can then help you find happiness.
Yeah, well said. There was also a lot of research in those that win the lottery, and initially they see their spike in happiness after winning the lottery, yet after time, again, that happiness level drops.
Yeah. I was even talking to a client earlier this week who's struggling with a bit of a gambling disorder. And we were going through the life cycle of his gambling, and the peak that he gets, the high, the happiness that he gets after a big win is like no other. And then the next day finds himself spending most of that money trying to seek more happiness, and by gaining more property, more things, more material things that exist. And it's so short-lived. By 2 days after a big win, back at the casino trying to achieve another big win, so they can start to feel a sense of prestige, and he can start to feel like he's somebody and he's worth it. And so it's the money never actually gives it anything to him. It just gives him an avenue to then try to seek more external factors that are going to somehow fill a void within him. And I just don't think the answer has ever been money. And you can ask any billionaire, anybody, I don't think any of them, maybe their life's a little bit easier because they have the money, but I don't think that the money actually contributes to any level of contentment.
Yeah, happiness is both a choice and a lifelong endeavor. It's got to be. It's got to be a choice, and know that it's not a destination. It's something to be traveled. It's a journey to be traveled.
That's an interesting way to look at it. I think many people think of happiness as this concept that once you have it, you got it.
Based on circumstances alone. Exactly. And
Right.
that's not happiness. Our happiness, the research of happiness shows that our happiness fluctuates. I mean, there's a poll with parents, and they said that their greatest joy and the thing that brings them the most happiness is their children. Rightfully so, right? I'm not a parent, but I could only imagine. Yet, when they're surveyed throughout the day, their greatest source of pain is their children.
Mm-hmm.
So their children are both their greatest joy and their greatest pain.
Mm. So yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing you say, and as you interpret that information, is that if you want to achieve happiness, you have to also recognize that you are going to have to go through struggle as well. There's difficulty that's involved in attaining happiness to make it actually stick.
Thank you for saying what you just said. There is no such thing as lasting happiness. It comes and goes. We experience joy. We experience positive effect, right? Positive emotion. We sometimes experience negative effect. That is part of the human experience. That is where we have to have enough psychological capital. I don't want to digress here, but this is a passion of mine, just as it is with you, is psychological capital is a concept. There's resilience, right? The ability to withstand, recover, grow. And we know literature says that resiliency is the ability to bounce back. I just add a little bit more to it. Resilience is the ability to withstand, recover, and grow. Psychological capital is really about enhancing individual well-being. And it's based on 4 concepts: hope, self-efficacy, resilience, and optimism. And I think, gosh, we could go into this happiness and optimism thing. I'm excited to be talking about all of this.
I have so many questions and almost challenges to some of what you just said as well. And I agree with it. There's this sort of chicken or the egg conversation that always goes on when we talk about certain leadership traits or certain just personality traits of people in general, that whether they are learned behaviors or they can be learned behaviors or they're inherent. And I often wonder, is resilience and optimism, are those things that people can attain through learning and experience, or is that something that's inherent and it's part of your upbringing and you just are able to resort to?
I'm going to add one more piece to that. You mentioned resilience, you mentioned optimism, but let's also add happiness to that. So let's start with resilience. Resilience is not a genetic trait. Resilience is derived by the way that we learn to deal with life obstacles, how to be able to maintain composure and adaptability. So the fact is that individuals can in fact learn to become more resilient. It's not a genetic trait. Optimism. You can learn to become more optimistic. Dr. Martin Seligman is really the pioneer in optimism and positive psychology. And he writes a book on learned optimism. So in fact, you can learn how to begin to see that glass is half full rather than half empty. And happiness is actually 50% genetic and about 10 to 40% circumstances.
Interesting.
So resilience, not genetic, right? You can learn to become more resilient. Optimism, you can learn to become more optimistic. Happiness, 50% genetic, according to research, and 10 to 40% is in circumstances. And the thing with circumstances is that they're all short-lived.
Right.
Isn't this fascinating stuff? It gets me excited.
No, I mean, it's such an interesting concept, and it's like I keep thinking of like the idea of the pursuit of happiness, and the pursuit of it is actually the journey of trying to achieve happiness is actually where happiness is found. It's that the building towards something of happiness. We're always in the pursuit of happiness. We're never not in the pursuit of it, because once you achieve it, it's not something that lasts. It's not something that, okay, I've got happiness, good, it's going to last for the rest of my life. And so it's interesting that we have to consistently adapt and learn new ways of thinking in order to maintain a certain level of happiness. The reason I said that this topic was appropriate, and it's just funny how life works sometimes, is I've been very vocal about this, so I don't mind sharing again that I'm in recovery from a substance use disorder, and it's been over 10 and a half years now, but I still attend a certain type of community support group that helped me maintain my recovery. And last night, the topic that somebody proposed was asking people who've been around for a little while to discuss happiness and how they've attained happiness while working in this program. And I just sat quietly because I really wanted to listen and understand. And it was interesting to hear people ranging from 1 to 2 years in this program to, to 10 days, 30 days in the program, to all the way up to 45 years in the program, discuss happiness and discuss how happiness has always been on the other side of struggle and is a conscious decision that we have to make on a regular basis to work towards happiness, to flip our mindset, to restart our day when we need to rely on certain spiritual concepts to be able to achieve and maintain happiness. I love hearing it, and I love people's opinion and how they discussed happiness as well. Is that someone talked about having happiness means that we're not wanting for anything at that moment, that we're actually accepting who we are and where we are in that moment, in this very moment, and being grateful for what we have in our life and being able to remind ourselves that we have it good right now compared to how things used to be on the other side of struggle. And I that's my long-winded way of basically asking you, what is happiness? What is this concept that we're going after? And is happiness the same as all of these other terms that we hear, like gratitude, contentment? Is that happiness? And what does that mean? How do we get there? What does it look like?
Yeah, what a great question. So happiness, is contentment and joyfulness combined. Happiness is subjective well-being, right? My happiness is not your happiness.
Right.
I think that's important. And happiness, again, according to research, and by no means am I an expert in this. I'm sharing legitimate information that I have experienced, that I have learned from, the Mental Hygiene Project has Dr. Shannon Taylor, who's an associate professor at the University of Central Florida. He's our director of research and learning. He does all of our technical papers. So I never want to be the smartest person in the room. And, I think there's no human expert. So there's no leadership expert. There's no happiness expert. I think we should all strive, to your point earlier, to be a lifelong student of continuous development. But happiness comes from habits. That's from faith. It's from friendships. It's from family. It's from work. And interestingly enough, Harvard University has done one of the longest studies on happiness with college graduates. I think it was like for 70 years. For 70 years, longest running research. And what they found in their research when they studied those individuals for that long is that relationships were the number one contributor to happiness. The number one contributor.
Wow.
And how mindful are we to our relationships, to our family, to our friends, to our colleagues, to the people that we interact with day to day? Your community builds your immunity. How are you strengthening your immunity to really build a community that keeps you happy and healthy? And listen, I'm humble, but when I go into Publix, people get excited to see me. I get even more excited to see them. Right. I normally just give, the bagger and the cashier a candy bar if they want. Sometimes I'll give them a Publix gift card to get them lunch. And I do that because I genuinely care. This isn't about me right now, but there's a thing called a helper's high. Yeah. And when you tend to do things for others, it tends to bring you joy. And I'm also strengthening relationships.
Mm-hmm.
It's emotional intelligence almost.
This makes sense so much when you consider the flip side of this, of the studies that have recently come out with the Surgeon General about isolation being linked to depression. And you could see how that the flip side of this really does have an effect on us if we are isolated and we're not contributing to society and we're not interacting with others and we don't have these wonderful relationships outside of our house and outside of our own head. We can find ourselves in a pretty desperate and sad situation.
You look at the Maslow hierarchy of needs, belongingness. We all want to belong.
Yeah.
Myself included.
Yeah.
Who does not want to belong?
That's where I always say that people who say, I don't care what anybody thinks. I call those some of the biggest liars that exist. And I know sometimes it comes from a place of defense and all this, but there is no way that we don't care what others think, because we are social beings. We want to belong to a culture, to a society, and we want to feel like we're contributing to something greater than ourselves. And we want to bring joy and happiness and smiles to people's life. That is human nature. We want to help feed and enjoy the company of others.
Can you imagine having leaders do that? Leaders cultivating a workplace where there's joy and happiness. I mean, we all remember a leader in our lives that we wanted to work for.
Yeah.
We wanted to work for them. I remember working at my very first fire department. There's this thing called a time trade. And basically, they're great. I miss those things. A time trade, I'm not trying to digress, but it's going to go to the happiness story here in a minute.
Yeah.
So a time trade is essentially where I go someone of equal rank or who is capable to fulfill my position and say, hey, can you work for me this day? Yeah, sure. And then I go and work for them someday, right? So that way I don't have to use vacation time. Well, my particular lieutenant was not really a happy guy. I mean, he was miserable. He was pessimistic, always saw the glass as half empty. I don't even think it was half empty. It was just empty.
Yeah.
I literally could not get people to do a time trade. They did not want to go to work for this person for 24 hours.
So his him being miserable contributed to other people around him not being happy, which led to them not wanting to help other people.
Because happiness is contagious. Yeah. Happiness is contagious. When we're working with happy people, they tend to make us happier. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't the case in this circumstance with this lieutenant. So happiness is contagious. And happiness as a leader can really promote a happy and healthy workplace that has higher levels of job satisfaction that equals or leads to life satisfaction. Mm-hmm. What an honor. The Mayo Clinic, I forget who did this quote, but according to the Mayo Clinic, must have been the Mayo Clinic. According to the Mayo Clinic, the person you report to is as important for your health as your family doctor.
Mm. Wow.
Right? Wow.
That is those are some big words you're throwing around.
You know? Yeah.
It's super interesting to think about. And I think, the two things that came up for me is that, one, I know for myself, I actually learn better of what not to do from people. I learn more from negative experiences of how I want to act over positive experiences. So I'm able to actually look at a negative situation and then reflect, okay, where have I seen the opposite of this and how do I want to behave? Or can I choose to be the opposite of this? And I think about some of the most miserable times of my professional life. And those times have been when I've worked for some of the most selfish leaders. And it wasn't that they were miserable necessarily, because I don't know if they were miserable or not, but I know that they were selfish. And they made us miserable because they were selfish, they weren't caring, and they only cared about their own motivations and everything that we did had to benefit them. And having that mindset led to high turnover, led to complete employee dissatisfaction, led to a lot of arguments, and led to actually competition and arguments amongst the other employees as well. It sort of kind of created chaos of having a selfish leader versus having leaders that I've had in the past that have taken the time to sit down with different employees, that empower people to listen. And again, I don't know if I can reflect on their happiness level or not, but I know that the happiness level overall, or the feeling of belonging is what I'll call it, a sense of belonging to an organization, was so much higher when I had a leader that was more selfless and more compassionate and more empathetic and really focused more on the servant leadership model of how can I make my team feel as fulfilled? How can I make my team the best that they can be so that I can create a culture that's going to then serve the customers or clients or whomever we were serving at that point, have the greatest results. So it's interesting to hear, and I would say some of the best times in my life working were for those selfless leaders, and I think it's because they contributed to my sense of happiness at work or contentment where I worked.
Yeah, I have unfortunately worked for some pretty crappy leaders in my day, and I've worked for some phenomenal leaders, and I have learned from those crappy leaders. I've learned what not to do. And it was really about shifting my mindset of being a victim and saying there is something to be learned here. Mm. And I'll never forget those feelings of discouragement and just my desire almost for a lack of organizational commitment.
Yeah.
Because I had a toxic leader.
Yeah.
And I think before anyone accepts a leadership position, that they have to ask themselves, to be a leader is knowing that you want to be one. Mm-hmm. You have to want to be a leader.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to fail and learn. Mm-hmm. And you have to be willing to maintain an open and reflective mindset. Because this theory of happiness may not come, we're in a multi-generational workforce. And so different generations, you know this, Blake, may view happiness as more of a priority than other generations and maybe even other ethnicities. And that's okay, right? We all have different thinking styles. But and let me also share that there's both formal leaders and informal leaders. This conversation is just not for those in the formal leadership position.
Right.
But going back to being a leader and knowing that you want to be one, it's important to be open and reflective. Let's look at this from a psychological paradox. We have certainty and we have open and reflectiveness. Certainty is making known what you believe and what you just know, right? And if we're too high and too strong in that, we can come off as dogmatic.
Right.
On the flip side of that, it's a paradox. If we're too open and reflective, then we may be viewed as being inconclusive. We're not able to make a decision. Mm-hmm. So the whole key to be a healthy leader, which is a concept in and of itself, healthy leadership, is having a balance of those two. Certainty and always being open and reflective to new ideas, new concepts, and new leadership theories. I mean, we could talk about perceived organizational support. We could talk about psychological contracts. There's a lot of leadership concepts that fall into this almost.
Yeah. I really tend to agree with you completely. And I think obviously the data all supports that same concept as well. That I think, yes, you have to want to be a leader. I think a lot of people, though, are put in positions where they're being promoted, which comes with them having to manage a team, or they all of a sudden they're thrown into leadership. And what I think people have to recognize is that, yes, you may have to want to be a leader, but if it was also never in your plans, but you're thrown into it based on a promotion because you're trying to move up in your career, I think it's your responsibility, now that you have people who report to you, to go and start to seek some of this knowledge, and go to seek on how we can grow and how we can be a better leader. You don't necessarily have to have the want. You can also be really good at your job, and that's why you were promoted, and now you have people to report to you. But it's your responsibility now to go and seek some of this growth so that you can be a good leader and be effective in your position. I think what ends up happening, though, and it's funny, I talk about when we do these compassionate leadership seminars, I very quickly in the beginning call out, I say, you're about to sit through a 3-hour seminar, which 90% of you are going to walk out of here and not apply a single thing that I discussed, because you are not willing to do the work on yourself to be able to be the best leader you can be. It seems like too much work. So you're not going to apply any of the stuff. It's all going to sound like nice concepts, and you're going to enjoy this presentation, I'm sure, because it sounds great, but you're not going to actually put in the work to get there. And I point that out in the very beginning, because I want them to see the importance of, it takes us as leaders doing work on ourselves in order to be the best leaders, so that we can be of service and help those who are reporting to us. So it's that concept that you talked about. I completely agree. And you have to want it, but you have to also have a want to be better, and a willingness to put in the time and effort to be a better leader if you want to create a happy team.
Yeah, to better your best. And I think it's also important to give yourself grace and know that this isn't like a light switch. It's on, it's off, right? Okay, here's the concept. It's just like a light switch. No, this is a dimmer switch. And it takes time to fully illuminate and bring the light to some of these concepts. It's a slow turning process to really understand these theories and how to apply them, and to really see how they have both a human and financial impact. Because all of this stuff that we're talking about does have a human impact, right? Health outcomes on individuals, our employees, the people that we lead, but also our bottom line, a financial impact because of performance and outcomes. I mean, pretty important stuff.
Yeah. And I think some of the reasons why people don't go after some of this growth and try to learn and be better leaders at times is that I think being a leader it's a scary term. It's almost like a bad word, in a sense. People hear leader and they just imagine, they have this idea that I can never do that. That's scary. I'm not a leader. And I think the same actually comes to mind with happy. The word happy, it's almost like this unattainable goal that I'm not going to be able to achieve. And it seems impossible to so many. But based on what I'm hearing you talk about, is that it's the consistent effort moving towards it is what matters most, and is where we finally find that sense of happiness. Is that it's not this off and on switch like you talked about. It's this dimmer process that sometimes it gets darker and sometimes it gets lighter, but slowly we're moving towards a bright room. And we have to be just taking it baby steps and little bits at a time. I think then that's how we become the best leader. No one wakes up in the morning and all of a sudden is this incredible, charismatic and motivating and beautiful leader who does everything right.
Exactly. Leaders, great leaders, are willing to fail. And when they do, they own up to it. Mm-hmm. They own up to it. They share their experience. They show that vulnerability. Mm-hmm. I mean, is there such thing as oversharing? Yeah, depending on the circumstance or the situation. Yeah. But to have that vulnerability can then really start to create a sense of psychological safety.
Yeah.
Right. Where people feel like they can open up and speak up and with what you just said, it makes me think of imposter syndrome. people lacking confidence and being able to be a leader.
Mhm.
And I appreciate those people that believe that they shouldn't be a leader. I think I just froze there.
I heard. I can still hear you though.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
There's
I
okay.
think people don't recognize that leadership and happiness, we put the two of them together, is sort of rooted in imperfection, and that no one is expecting this perfect person to come in. And that's really where the imposter syndrome comes in, is that I can't make a mistake, so I can't do this job because I know I'm going to screw up.
Perfection does not exist.
Right.
I'm glad that you talked about, perfection. Yeah, perfection doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Seek continuous improvement, better your best, and continue to move forward. And make your team part of that. Ask your team, hey, do one-to-ones and ask yourself, what do you think I'm doing right? Is there anything that I can learn? Is there anything I can do differently? Get that real feedback from your team.
Yeah. Do you, well, I'm just going to say real quick, and thank you for this topic and thank you for this conversation, because it's making my mind jump all over the place, which is always a sign of a great conversation. I'm listening and at the same time just getting giddy and thinking of all these different things. But I'm thinking about, it's somebody who I actually already interviewed on here. I had a really great call with a professor who is at the program I'm going through right now. And he talked about opportunity that the school offers you, and that many and most people in the program don't take the school up on the opportunities that are presented, because they're afraid they're not going to know how to do it once they get there to kind of do like an organizational assessment or whatever it may be that the school is offering you to do, and sort of earn credits doing so. Most people decide to go the easier, softer way and decide to just stay in their comfort zone and don't take them up on these opportunities. And the advice that he gave me was, don't listen to that fear. Don't let that stop you. And just jump on the opportunity, whether you even understand the job description or not. Just jump in and figure it out as you go, because that is how you are going to learn. That's how you're going to grow. And that is what's going to make you the best leader, having the willingness to take risks and learn something new on the fly, and build your resume and take these opportunities that you're afraid of, is how you're going to find your confidence as a leader.
Live boldly. There's 3 zones of performance. There's the panic zone, the comfort zone, and the performance zone. Panic zone, we're fight or flight. We're not consistent. Comfort zone, we maintain the status quo. In the performance zone, we are off balance on purpose. We are being very intentional in stepping outside of that comfort zone and feeling a little uneasy and unbalanced, but we are deliberately taking that risk to be able to learn, grow, and develop.
Yep.
You speak and you give me these thoughts, and that just gave me the idea of the performance zones. And so I really hope that the things that we're talking about inspires people to think again and their confidence and the way that they look at happiness and well-being and all of these things. Let's keep going, because this is good stuff.
Thank you. And I just keep going back to the idea of that happiness and being a leader is not an off and on switch. And I'm hoping that if anybody who's listening, if they take one thing out of this conversation, is the realization that they don't have to have this unrealistic expectation of themselves, of their life, of their world, that they must just be happy tomorrow. And if they can't get there, then they failed at happiness. I'm hoping that people recognize the process, and the joy of working towards it is actually where you find that sweet spot of happiness.
Yeah, that's right. And again, our happiness comes again from the number one source, relationships, but faith, family, and friends. And Make sure that you are doing things that bring you joy. We talk about self-care, behavioral and spiritual and all of the other aspects. What about other self-care? Going fishing or going hunting or getting the manicure, the pedicure, and those different things.
Mhm.
But again, happiness isn't based on circumstances alone.
Right.
Always remember that too. And happiness is contagious. And once you can, find that, bring that motivation, that inspiration to your employees. Be that optimistic leader that helps people look at the glass as half full rather than half empty. When things get tough, teach them about, not only individual resilience, but organizational resilience, or another term for that is strategic resilience,
Right.
and how to be able to just adapt and overcome. And you will develop a ready and resilient workforce.
Agreed. And I want to talk a little bit about the flip side of happiness, which I guess we can call it unhappiness. And I think it's important that people recognize too that although happiness is fleeting, so is unhappiness. And I think of the saying that we use all the time is that, this too shall pass, applies to everything in our life, understanding that the only thing constant that we're always going to have in our worlds for everyone that we have in common is that change will always be present. So it is a practice towards moving towards happiness, but also understand that when you're unhappy, it is also not a light switch that's going to last forever. It's something that we can also work away from, and you'll eventually be able to move past it.
Yeah, circumstances don't last forever, but our decisions do. Our decisions do. And so when times get tough and things really test your resilience, you got to ask yourself, is this going to matter from a week from now? I'll give you an example of a 2017 Hyundai Sonata Sport. I bought it brand new and get my oil changes done regularly. Needless to say, I was driving the other day. There was not one drop of oil and my engine blew up. I mean, it's toast. I'm in a rent-a-car. And it didn't affect me one bit. And it's not. I had to say, is this going to matter next week?
Right.
Is this going to matter in 2 weeks from now? And I had to try to find gratitude. I'm thankful that I wasn't on a road trip. I'm thankful that, I have the finances to be able to get this fixed. And then here to discover, it looks like Hyundai is going to cover it. So the optimism is important stuff to be able to maintain composure and adaptability. Experiencing negative emotions is part of living.
Yes.
But they don't last forever.
Mm-hmm. And our responses to them, like you said, those are responses to those negative emotions or situations and events. That's what matters most. And for those of you thinking that being easygoing or allowing things to roll off your back or to have a certain sense of perspective when things get tough, are thinking that that's another inherent thing that you're born with, it's in your genes, or it's how you were raised as a little kid, I definitely would argue that is not true at all. And I always think back and I hear my mom's voice and I think back to how I was before recovery and how I am after recovery. And I hear my mom's voice saying to me, whatever those therapy meetings you're going to, whatever you're doing there, it's working. You're so calm. Because I was not that person. My entire life, every event was this big, traumatic, explosive, catastrophic event where I would explode and nothing rolled off my back and it would ruin my week, ruin my month. I would allow everything to be, all of the negative to influence me. And it wasn't until I gained a sense of perspective, which I think a lot of people talk about rock bottom when you're overcoming addiction. You have to hit this rock bottom. I believe that we choose our rock bottom. We choose when, because things can always get worse. If you're still alive, things can always get worse when you're dealing with something like addiction. And so I believe we choose our rock bottom. And I chose at that point to gain a sense of perspective of that I no longer need to live the way that I'm living. things have gotten bad enough for me that I want to make some changes in my life. I want to seek happiness. I want to seek fulfillment, identity, perspective. And it was making that decision and then slowly working at it over time and allowing others into my process to say, hey, Blake, you're doing it again. Stop doing that. You're okay. Everything's all right. Take a breath, make a gratitude list, do this, do that. Allowing others to guide me through that was actually what's changed me as a person, to where now I am the one who, most of the time, if something goes wrong, I'm the calm one. And I can have this sense of perspective of, listen, it could always be worse. I'm going to be fine. We'll get through this. It's just another, I have a friend of mine who always says, another beautiful day of uncertainty. And this is just another moment of uncertainty. And, having that mindset has really helped me. And that's where I go to all the time with when we're overcoming mental health issues, behavioral health issues, addictions, the sense of perspective it offers you, but also the leadership training that it gives you. It allows you, essentially overcoming these types of issues really helps you, if you're doing the work, helps you gain the emotional intelligence that you talked about earlier, to recognize how to handle certain situations, certain conversations, and how to be a better leader as you move forward. You become a leader in your own life first, and then you're able to help others through their process as well.
I appreciate you sharing everything you just did, and it put me in awe. You asked earlier, can resilience be learned? Can optimism be learned? I'm a prime example of it. I was not a resilient individual. I was not an optimistic individual. And this isn't an excuse, but the fire service changes who you are. It kind of jades you. And I was not a great leader. I didn't even know the concept of informal leadership. It's because I have had such amazing human beings come into my life, and I don't want to get emotional right now, but I've had amazing people come into my life and guide me, and that was their leadership, right? To inspire and motivate for success, right? Both personally and professionally. And Dwight Bain, he's a licensed mental health counselor. He's just amazing. He contributes so much to me. Dr. Shannon Taylor, my business partner, Michael Stahl, Claudia Swanger, she works with us. She's a licensed mental health counselor. So many people. Bill Sturgeon, my former city manager, who really invested in me. So make sure that you find time to seek those mentors, people that you aspire to be like. But I was not a leader. I was not an informal leader. I had no concept of leadership. I was not resilient. Something bad happened, I'd go on Facebook and hey, this is it. I'm done. You get those Facebook notification 10-year anniversary posts. I'm like, did I post that?
Yeah.
What?
Yep.
So my business partner has a quote. It's never too late to be the person you always wanted to be. It's never too late. You just have to make the choice to want to learn more about happiness and know what real happiness is. And hopefully we gave you that today. It's not based on circumstances alone. It's a journey and it's a process, and it takes time. Resilience, the same thing. It can be learned. Optimism.
And just to add to what you just said, an important piece is the having other people in your life to mentor you, and that you cannot become the leader that you want to be, and you cannot become truly happy without having people in your life that are going to help contribute to both of those concepts. And it's the people that you surround yourself with that have the greatest impact on your level of happiness and your ability as a leader, and being able to take influence from others, good or bad, and being able to grow and being open to feedback, open to suggestions, and never thinking that you know it all. That is how you you find that sense of happiness. I'm a firm believer that there's a massive correlation between growth and happiness. And as long as we're seeking growth, we will continue to build happiness and build confidence in who we are.
I love that. Yes, I agree with you. I definitely agree with you.
Well, as I told you, we always go over time. We shoot for 40 minutes and we're at about 50 right now. So I listen, this is one of my favorite topics to discuss. And I hope that if anybody learned anything, and I almost wish I changed the topic or the title to happiness is not a bad word, because I think that people need to understand that happiness is totally attainable. It's just not what you think it is. And happiness is different for everybody. And it's a process and a journey. And you can get there if you put in the work and the time to do so. It just takes some hard reflection and some relying on others to get there.
Blake, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to going to LinkedIn and seeing if anyone had any questions that we can maybe answer. Have a fantastic week and look forward to connecting soon.
Thank you again for coming on. I knew this was going to be a great conversation. You have that amazing energy about you. So I had a good feeling this was going to be a good one. I feel like we can tell people now that this was like a Michael Jordan situation where Ryan had the flu the past couple of days and he still showed up and won the championship today. So that was incredible. Thank you for that. And
you're welcome.
I appreciate you showing up. And bye, everyone. Please feel free to comment. We got a few thank yous coming in. Love this discussion today. Thank you. Joanna said thank you. Reb said thank you for this interesting topic. So we appreciate you guys listening and standing by this entire time. And please join me next week and the following week afterwards. We've got a bunch of great guests lined up to explore all different aspects of leadership topics and some pretty interesting areas that we're going into that some of them make me nervous, some of them make me excited, and I'm just pumped to explore it all. So thank you, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon.